Welcome to the ninth presentation in our series on action learning. We're very pleased that you are joining us. This presentation is about coaching and questions in action learning. I'm Carter McNamara of Authenticity Consulting. We're providing this series to make action learning even more available and more accessible to everyone. This presentation is one in a series, and they are best viewed in order, so please be sure to visit the website listed below for more information on the complete series as well as more information about our company. And so now, let's get started. So far, our series has explained all about the action learning process, including what people use it for, membership in groups, and how groups are facilitated. Action learning solves problems and achieves goals primarily by sharing powerful questions, taking actions between meetings, and then reflecting on those questions and actions. So in this presentation, we'll get us started by reviewing some dynamics of how complex problems are often solved. That is the basis for other topics in this presentation, including how questions are used to solve problems, achieve goals, and generate learning at the same time. We'll suggest the best types of questions to use in action learning. We'll refer to the skill of questioning as coaching. That will lead into an explanation of how coaching works in action learning, along with various formats in which coaching can occur. A growing trend is to do action learning virtually, that is, over the phone or over the internet, so we'll give some quick tips for that. A common question is, what is successful coaching in action learning? And we'll share our answer to that as well. In the first of the presentation in this series, we looked at various driving forces and trends that resulted in action learning becoming so popular now. We reviewed how people and organizations are facing more complex problems than ever before. That's because we're recognizing the wide diversity of people around the world, competition is increasing for resources and markets, and technology is rapidly changing how we live and work. But one of the challenges to solving complex problems is the way we think about them. Many of us suffer from certain illusions. One is the belief that the answer to a problem in the past can now be used to solve a similar problem we're facing now. For example, if a person benefited from a time management class in the past, then that person tends to believe that everyone should take the same class and will benefit the same way. But that's not accurate, because many people suffer from time management because, for example, they don't want to delegate because they don't have faith in others. Or, for example, some practitioners try to apply action learning in one culture the same way they did it in another. They quickly find that other cultures are very averse to asking questions of each other. We're learning that finding the right problem is as important as finding the right answer. In our previous example of the time management problem, the person would be a lot better off when she realizes that her problem is not having enough confidence in others, rather than not taking a time management class. Before we review more about how action learning solves problems and helps us learn, we should first mention that there's different overall approaches to solving problems. There's the highly rational approach that tends to break down problems into various sequential stages. For example, to define the problem, clarify the problem, identify options, select the best option, and then try that option. Then there's a rather organic approach. For example, to mention the problem and then to start doing what's relevant and realistic for now, with the belief that if you keep doing that over time, the problem will be solved that way. Problems are best solved and challenging goals are often best achieved by continuous learning. Continuous learning is learning how to learn. It can come from reflection on experiences and on feedback from others. That reflection might have certain phases. For example, in our previous example of the person with a time management challenge, she would describe her challenge to the action learning group and might ask for help to improve her time management. She might add that she thinks she needs to work even harder to get things done. Others would start asking questions, such as, how did you conclude that you have a time management problem? She might answer, well, I assume that I'm not very good at it because I never finish anything on my list. Notice her assumption in her answer. Notice how she concluded that she's got a problem. Further questions to her might include, well, how is your to-do list even realistic? That is, how did you conclude that you should finish everything on it? She might respond, well, I never thought about that. I just put tasks on my list. Notice how she's seeing the situation a bit differently now? And further questions might include, It sounds like you're already working very hard. How realistic is it to expect yourself to do even more, to take a class? She might respond then, well, maybe it isn't. Notice how she's coming to understand the situation more fully now? So let's see further questions. What if they asked her, what would happen if you delegated more? She might thoughtfully respond, well, I don't like to delegate. To be honest, I just don't trust that they'll do as good a job as I would. Notice now how she's realized that time management might be just a symptom of her problem. Her problem might be that she just can't delegate. Maybe she just doesn't trust others. So in action learning, further reflections might help her to decide to start delegating before the next meeting. And then further questions might help her to get started with some additional and realistic next steps, like talking to her boss to get his advice, and so on. So in our example, the questions helped her to reflect on her situation and to learn from it, and to start taking relevant and realistic actions to address the real problem. Regarding learning, Reginald Revens, who we mentioned is the person who first started action learning, he explained the role of questions in part by using an equation. And the equation is the letters L equals P plus Q. Sounds a little complex and scientific, but it's not, and I'll try to explain. He asserted that learning comes from a combination of learning from programmed knowledge, and that's the letter P in the equation, plus from questioning, and that's the letter Q in the equation. He added that programmed knowledge is what comes from other experts, for example, from books and traditional training sessions. And he said that programmed knowledge is most useful in static situations where life or organizations will always be the same. Well, that rarely happens, doesn't it? Programmed knowledge is best when using learning to do a fairly routine or current task. But knowledge from continual questioning is best suited for situations of continual change, like those that we face today in life and work. When a person is asked questions that aim to help him, he feels honored. Honored that others are there to help him, that others believe in him. That usually results in strengthening the relationship between the person who's asking the question and the one who's answering them. And those relationships are very useful. For example, in helping team members to bond in the workplace. It also helps action learning groups to very quickly form and very quickly be useful to members. Another benefit of questions is that they help members to take ownership in addressing their situation, because the answers to the questions are theirs, not someone else's. And another benefit of questions is that they help members to make commitments to taking actions, because answers to questions help members think about their situations and not someone else's. The questions help members to select their own actions to address their own situations. One of the biggest, but often unmentioned results from action learning is that of authenticity. When people are asked questions, they slow down and reflect. Some even tend to think out loud. They often become more honest with themselves and with others in the group. Authenticity can self-correct. That is, when someone is open and honest, they more quickly sort through the systems of issues and they get to the real causes. Finally, we should mention that in some cultures, they don't like to hear and ask questions. They see questions as being challenging and disrespectful. In those cultures, it's important to involve members of the culture to help them design the action learning program for them, and how members can help each other in a deeply engaging and thoughtful manner. As the field of personal and professional coaching has grown so rapidly with its focus on the skill of asking good questions, so has the many, many views of what makes for good questions. Useful questions in action learning tend to be focused on whatever it is that person's working on for now, on that person's project. And useful questions are focused on the presenter's perceptions, assumptions, beliefs, and conclusions, not always on the details of that person's problem. There's a saying in coaching, coach the person and not the problem. And questions should not simply have a yes or a no answer, because those questions do not cultivate reflection. Thoughtful questions usually have more than one answer. The point is not to find an answer to the question, but rather to encourage the presenter to recognize his perceptions, to help the presenter to choose how to address a situation in a useful and active way, and to learn at the same time. And useful questions, they move the presenter to doing something that's relevant and realistic, and ideally to even more reflection on what's being done. Many coaches believe that questions about the past or about history do not really help the person with the project. Rather, those questions are used to help the person asking the question, not the person with the project. So many coaches stay away from questions about history and the past. A major advantage, though, of asking questions is that the people who are asking them usually don't need to know anything at all about the presenter, his personality, or where he comes from. The members of the group just need to use their curiosity and their compassion to help each other. We've referred to the field of personal and professional coaching when we use the term coaching. We added that many people refer to the skill of questioning as the skill in coaching. We should be even more clear now that the term means different things to different people. In some models of action learning, it refers to the nature of help between members. In other models, it refers to the nature of how an external facilitator, sometimes called a learning coach, helps the overall group. And still, in some models, coaching is based exclusively on asking questions. Yet in others, it can be integrated with useful advice and materials. The important point is to know how you're using it, explain that to others, and then be consistent. A coaching session is the phrase often used to describe the time when group members are focused on coaching a member. For example, each member might get 20 minutes in a meeting. Then that's a 20-minute coaching session. Usually members are coached one at a time, whether it's a single project or a multi-project program. In a single project program, members might coach one, some, or all members during a meeting, depending on the nature of the project that's being addressed. In a multi-project program, all of the members usually get coached in a meeting. And remember, they get coached one at a time. But regardless of the approach to action learning or the model being used, a session usually goes through somewhat similar phases. It's important to realize that regardless of the coaching model, all members learn during the entire coaching session, not just when getting coached, because all of the members are thinking of useful questions, and the questions are heard by all members of the group. To give you a better idea of what a coaching session might look like, here are some samples of coaching models. So you might imagine any one of these models being used during a coaching session. The first one shown is GROW, or we sometimes call it GROW. It's an acronym or a word made up of abbreviations, and the letters, they stand for questions about goals, the reality of the situation, options the person can take, and what will the person do from those options. Another example is ORID, or we call that ORID. It's a very popular coaching model, and that's another acronym. And those letters stand for questions to get objective information, to get feelings, to get information about the meanings, and information that is decisional. That is, what's the person going to do about that? The last model, where I've got the letters WIAL, that stands for the World Institute for Action Learning. And that organization has a suggested coaching model where questions are asked for the person to report on the situation, reframe it, generate solutions, then make a commitment to actions, and then overall to help team learning. Here's a suggestion. It might be useful for you to search for the phrase personal coaching here in YouTube and watch some examples of actual sample coaching sessions. Get an even better impression of what coaching is, but keep in mind that's just one session. Usually that's done in an overall program with multiple sessions. Virtual action learning is conducting an action learning meeting over the phone or over the internet. That is, it's not face-to-face. So the sharing of questions and so on, they're to help members during the meeting, but they're over the phone and they're called virtual coaching. Virtual coaching has become very popular because it saves costs when people are not located close enough to meet face-to-face. But when doing virtual action learning, it's still best if members can first meet face-to-face so they get to know each other more personally. Although many programs still have very good groups without having met first. In those programs, members still get to know each other somehow. For example, they have a private online website where they share personal information about themselves. It also helps to use webcams so people can see each other's faces. Despite the concerns that some people have about doing virtual groups, There's a bit of irony to it because some people who otherwise would not speak up in a face-to-face group, they feel very comfortable and more as equals in virtual sessions. Virtual groups do need certain ground rules or practices though. For example, each member should say his or her name before offering a question over the phone, and each person should mute the phone during the discussions. Obviously, too, there needs to be some technical support available in case there's a technical glitch. Members sometimes feel that they've not done a good job of coaching unless they've solved all the problems for everybody in the meeting. That's unfortunate, because the job of coaching is not to solve everybody's problem, or even to be sure the other people take advantage of all their opportunities. There may be differing opinions about successful coaching, and we'll offer ours here. We think successful coaching is first following the action learning process that they're all committed to. It's making sure people fully attend and participate in meetings. It's adhering to the ground rules that the group agreed upon. It's always attending to the current presenter in a meeting. And it's making sure that questions that are asked are there to help the presenter and not just the people who are asking them. Thank you for viewing this presentation, and we hope that you will go on to the next one. You might benefit from the following resources to add even more detail to our overviews of action learning. The website Action Learning Central references an extensive amount of free resources, including about the action learning process, each of its key elements, examples of action learning programs, and tools for each aspect of action learning. There's even an action learning glossary with definitions for each of the common terms in action learning. Our company, Authenticity Consulting, also is available to answer your questions or to help you in any other way. Our firm does very successful action learning groups around the world and for a wide variety of outcomes and applications. There's also the free management library at managementhelp.org. You can find resources and tools for almost any activity in the workplace, including for many of the activities in action learning. You can find more about each of these three resources by going to actionlearningcentral.com/gratis and select the presentation entitled General Resources for Action Learning. Thank you.